Today's episode is sponsored by Future State Media, experts in off-Amazon traffic for Amazon sellers. Future State Media will build you a custom-made website to deliver sales for you on Amazon. Built to grab traffic from search engines and social media, your site can be used as a secret weapon for launching products on Amazon or just to stabilize your Amazon sales. It means you can also build an email list on autopilot. Go to futurestatemedia.com for your free guide to Google SEO for Amazon sellers today. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the Amazing FBA podcast. I'm your host, Michael Veazey, and today I'm with Diane Boerstler, who's an ever more impressive lady the more we talk. So she's the Hypnotic Amazon copywriter. She's helped small family businesses make over $5 billion. That's billion with a B, over 12 years, and is a master NLP practitioner or master NLP certified. So very impressive lady. Diane, welcome back first of all to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back again. I really love doing this.
This is great fun. Yeah, I'm enjoying our conversation. So in our last episode, we talked about before somebody brings something to you that's some terrible Me Too product, they haven't really thought about who's buying it and whether it's any different or not, whether the actual product itself is different. And you have to sometimes gently have a conversation about that. So we've talked about that whole thing in the last episode. If you didn't catch that, I'd really urge you, in fact, I beg you on bended knee to try and think that one through before you expect marketing to dig you out of a hole that you've created by sourcing a product that is just boring. But we are going to now talk about the marketing stuff, which is great. Hypnotic copy, really cool sort of title for yourself based around NLP. Now, tell me a bit about NLP. I've got a bit of history with NLP myself, but tell me about it. What is it and why is that relevant to selling stuff on Amazon?
So I like to say that I like to use applied NLP and conversational hypnosis. And that was my background. Oh my goodness. Over 10 years ago, I was actually a special education teacher and director and a therapist. And so I figured that if I could use those specific words and those phrases to help get high schoolers who'd been spent 3 and 4 years in juvie to suddenly comply within a classroom without a taser involved, then, after they come out of jail, then I figured that there must be something applicable to it where I could help people solve their problems both on the business side by writing words that sell things and also just kind of keep that therapy side open and help people to find products and services that solve their problems. So NLP stands technically for neuro-linguistic programming, okay? Or some people say neuro-linguistic reprogramming. And the idea is it's a study into the brain's meta programs. Like it's like if you're running a video camera, right? From the moment you're born, some say before you're born, and you have, let's say you're recording every single visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, which is smelling, and gustatory, which is taste, right? You're recording every single thing that you've ever seen, and there's like 4,000, to 4 million, depending on who you ask, bits of information flying into this video camera on the front of your head, and you're making those decisions. You're creating meta programs, almost like, you remember VCRs? I don't want to say CDs.
I do, yeah, sort of old videotape players, yes. Impossible to use, famously, yeah.
I know, right? So I can still program one. I'm so pretty proud of that. So you're recording all of this as you're growing up. It's from infancy, some say, like I said, in the womb, up until your adulthood, and it creates a set of meta programs, right? And so these meta programs are things like, not only like how you make decisions, like the 9 steps or 12 steps your brain uses to make decisions. Sometimes it's like 25 steps without even thinking about it. It's subconscious, right? It's also like, what do you go towards and what do you go away from? Are you the kind of person who needs to be sold once to be convinced, or do you need to be sold 7 different times? A lot of people say you need 7 touch points. That's not true of everybody. It never has been. A lot of people will say, like, well, you need to capture their attention in 4 seconds. Only a specific set of the population. It goes, NLP goes over things like, are we working from our, people say reptilian brain, which some people have said does not exist, or are we working from more of our conscious side of the brain? That all pours into sales copy because you have subconscious readers who are going to read every single word and watch every single minute of every single video. And then you have 20% of the population approximately who are going to read those. You'll see I put all caps, right, on Amazon, because you can't use bolding in the bullet points and you can't use italics and you can't. So we have to find a way to kind of make those specific hot button words stand out to them, because they're going to skim and they're only going to stop if they see something that they know is what they're looking for, right? So all this kind of human psychology and these human psychology triggers from NLP and conversational hypnosis, we've kind of learned to use those applied into the words that sell products on Amazon and services outside of Amazon, of course.
Amazing. Well, I mean, first of all, congrats. You're not the only person that I know who's got a special needs teacher background. He's in the business of serving Amazon sellers. Weirdly enough, Paul Harvey, who runs Seller Chatbot, has been on the show before, and he mentioned his days. Basically, learnt to hold a person in one hand whilst holding a chair in the other that they've been using to hit another child.
True.
Is that your same skill set? So, I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. I think, yeah. I mean, first of all, it put two things to say about that. I mean, which are maybe valuable in terms of mindset. The first thing is, it's like that's a dangerous and difficult and emotionally challenging situation. I know personally, having done ordinary teaching a little bit with piano or what have you, I wouldn't be the man for that. And as Frank Kern says, look, as marketers, all we do is we talk and we type. Let's not stress too hard about it. It's not like being a soldier or even, in your case, a teacher in the front line. And the other thing is, of course, I guess after that, being able to persuade people with words as opposed to tasers, relative to that, I guess selling Amazon copy isn't so difficult. But having said that, I'd love it if you can drawing up the dots for me. How is this stuff really directly relevant to selling on Amazon? You've already mentioned people who skim and look for the all caps benefits, which is a very smart thing to do, of course. How else does it kind of tie in?
The special education side of things, or
NLP. Well, not so much that, the NLP or all the insights you've developed, the hypnotic copywriting thing. How does that directly show up in Amazon listings?
Oh my goodness. Well, I have a checklist that I go over every time that has 126 points in a 12-hour training, so it's hard to boil it down to 30 minutes. I guess I would say that it all starts, like we talked about a little bit before in our last podcast, it starts with the human psychology side of things. What kind of problem are you trying to solve? It starts as sales copywriter as a therapist, and business owner as a therapist trying to solve problems. If there's something specific, like a specific question you want me to answer, I totally can. Otherwise, I feel like it's like this, like I want to boil it down to this one pinpoint thing, but it's so vast. It goes really far into, more of the deeper psychology side of things.
Okay.
Is there like
Do I have a specific question? Okay, well, let me try and, I guess that's the thing. You're so expert, then like you're trying to boil this down. Well, I know we've talked before we went live with the show about to answer the question of what people want and identity and stuff. And you've got this thing called 5 logical levels. Is it worth that? Sounds like a really cool framework.
Yeah. Okay. So the 5 logical levels when you're looking at either sales copy or sourcing your product. Originally in psychology, people believed that the environment was the number one trigger and the predictor of a child's outcome as an adult, their success level, their income, their socioeconomic status. You guys know all these terms if you've been in one sociology class or one psychology class, right? Or even a business class, business marketing, right? So with NLP, one of the things that I learned that I found vastly helpful is that we need to look at the person as from the point of their meta programs and that recording that they've and how they're making the decisions, not based on their environment. Because we've heard for 20 years now, Tony Robbins grew up in a horrible situation, apparently. There are tons of people who've broken out of those horrible situations. We learned a long time ago that environment doesn't necessarily predict the decision somebody is going to make, right? So they created kind of a new framework that I believe they also based on some of Virginia's work from the 1970s that was both on feminism and on counseling for children in, I want to say Montessori. From, like I said, like the 1970s, which it kind of all became a framework with an NLP. All of NLP is borrowed from something. It's like someone took a lot of really great different ideas and collaborated them together. And it's great because as a group, everybody doesn't agree on every single thing. So it's kind of, even though people consider it controversial outside of it, unless you've been a part of it, you don't realize how controversial it is inside of it. And it's really driven by constantly changing thoughts and mindset. And I love mindset, right? That's fine. Mindset's like my second favorite thing, besides writing words itself. So with these 5 logical levels, to circle back around, level number 1 is really, people say it's your higher power, right? So does your customer believe that they are, let's say we're going to talk about a fat burning product, that they're genetically predisposed to being fat, and fat, I don't like that word, but that's the word that everybody uses, so we're going to use it. Genetically predisposed to being fat, or do they believe that they have some kind of control over that, right? Do they believe their higher power has decided that, whether they believe the higher power is science and genetics, or they believe in a higher power in terms of like God or the universe or energy, it just depends across, who it is, or do they believe they have control over that, right? Are they in control or is someone else in control? The second one is their identity. Identity is where we look at selling most Amazon products in my business. The reason for that is because people will talk about the benefits and they'll talk about the features and they'll talk about, okay, so this is really cool and these are the benefits that my people want. And these are the features that are going to get them those benefits. I'm here to tell you that it goes a little bit beyond that. And Tony Robbins says this as well. It's all about transformation. And transformation is all about how you see yourself on the inside, your identity, and most important, how you think people perceive you on the outside. We're all walking around caring about what people think without wanting to admit caring about what people think. I really care about what people think. I'm perfectly open and honest about that because I understand that that's who I am. Anybody who's out there trying to, if you're out there trying to lose weight, why? Is it because you care about how you feel? Or is it because you care a lot about how other people perceive you? Is it because of how society perceives you? If you're driving a certain car, for example, like that's where the identity thing lies, right? When I was married, I drove a Honda Pilot because that's what, I lived on an island and that's what people drove. And as soon as I moved back to the big city, I got a gorgeous black QX80 with 22-inch rims because that's what my identity drives from the city and that's what I like, right? So look at their identity and how they want to express that identity outside of like how the product will help them express that identity. Is it going to make them fitter? Is it going to make them cooler? Is it going to make them appear smarter? Like some people wear glasses to appear smarter, right? What is it that they really want to be perceived as? And then anchor your product to that. The next set is our beliefs, right? So we've got higher power, do you have control or someone else, your identity, and then your beliefs, right? So when we go down to the beliefs level, we're looking at not only do they believe that they can achieve this, because that kind of goes even with capabilities, which we'll talk about in a minute. We're talking about what are their beliefs they think are good or bad. What are their beliefs that they think, like we talked about, some people think that vegan is really good and some people think, okay, well, I'm not going to pay extra for it because while I'm sure it's cool they did that and they're animal friendly, I wouldn't pay extra for that, right? What are their beliefs in terms of their beliefs in self? Like, do they believe that they're the kind of person who lacks the motivation to use a foam roller every day to get fit, or the bands every day to get fit, like X3. I was just looking at X3s, right? They're these crazy bands that, anyhow. Do they believe that? What do they believe? And this goes back to, this is like, I can go off on a whole other thing on this, because beliefs tie into customer awareness level of your brand, right? So what do they believe is going to work? What do they believe is not going to work already? What are they looking for at that, 5 customer awareness levels, which we can go into. That would be a whole nother podcast probably, but I have a whole video on it. The next one now is capabilities. And this is the one that I find beyond identity. This is what people miss. Sales copywriters and people who write their own listings, they miss this the most, right? Does the person actually believe that whether or not you convince them to believe that your product works will mean nothing unless they believe it will work for them because they are capable, right? So are they capable of having the stamina to use the product? Are they capable of remembering to use it every day? Are they capable of figuring out all the buttons, right? There's a lot of electronic products that we write sales copy for, and they have these remote controls, and they're like, oh, it comes with the remote. And the seller is super excited that it comes with this remote, and you look at the remote and there's like 17 buttons. And I'm thinking, I have to hire a tech team to run the candles on top of the LED candles on top of, I don't think I'm capable of using this remote. I just want it to go on and off, maybe dim a couple times, right? So people will say, okay, so is it too complicated for me? With like office desks, is it too complicated for me to put together? Am I gonna need a third person? All I have are 2. What are their capabilities? Do they need extra skill? Do they need specialized, do they need a specialized person to get involved with this? If you see Amazon selling anything underneath any of your competitors that says, Amazon will come and assemble this, or Amazon will come and, install this, that means your people don't think they're going to be capable enough to do it. So you need to be really upfront about that and say, you're going to need help with this. On the same side, do they feel like, are they people who are like, I'm like a DIYer? Do you know what a DIYer is? Do-it-yourselfer?
Yeah, it's very much the same thing in the UK. Yeah, probably imported from
Yeah.
America in the 50s. I imagine, like everything else here, it's an American import, DIY. Yeah.
Right? Okay, so I'm a DIYer type. So I'm like, okay, so I don't care if you tell me I'm not going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out anyways, right? So there's a lot of people out there who have like, is that their mentality capability? Are they wanting to learn how to build something new, use a new tool, install something new, learn how to program something, and you want to focus on, yeah, this is going to be a little bit complicated, but if you're a DIYer and you love this kind of thing, if you like solving problems, and you like solving challenges, you're going to love putting this together. You want to focus on that. And like everybody knows a DIYer, but the last thing you want to do is solve it as something is so easy that a kindergartner can put it together.
This is really, really important. You just put your finger on, because, for example, like I was just thinking, my in our family, like my wife wears the traditional trousers, so she's got a drill. She owns a drill, which is a very male thing, and never mind Freudian view of it. You own a drill. I could tell that. I knew you were a drill person. My wife has a drill. I kind of like the idea of drilling, but the idea of actually having to use it and be held responsible for when the shells fall down. I probably inherited this from the video camera game where my dad, who is not a DIYer, put up shelves and they just fell down, and that was about it. But whereas my wife is got a drill in search of something to drill, she has not got a project for us to do right now involving the drill. And I said every so often, I mentioned something that might involve a drill, and she's like, oh, I get to use the drill.
Yeah, I get to use my drill.
Yeah. Whereas I'm like, no, it involves a drill. I'm hiring a guy to do that. That's it. So yeah, it's very important to know that, because you might be selling the same thing, same problem. I really want less chaos in our flat, and it wouldn't be hard to get less chaos, but I don't want to do the drilling, whereas my wife doesn't care that much about the chaos but loves drills. So what you've just said could be solving the same problem, same kind of customer avatar, because we're both middle class guys living in North London. Demographics wouldn't be much between us. One's male, one's female, and yet the male is the one who doesn't want to do the drilling, and so all the usual things would not have solved that problem of selling that. Because if you tried to sell to me, same way you sell to my wife, it would be like, I'm no, and my wife's like, get me the drill. So that's really important. What you just said, that just absolutely resonates for me. So smart. This is super smart, dude. I like this stuff.
And it's cross-gender lines though too, like you were just mentioning. So in the U.S., it's been a big, especially so when I'm working with sellers who are coming out of specific parts of the world, I won't necessarily mention. There's still very much that gender line, and I've seen, even when we look at images, like they've been running this product in the U.S. for 4 months, they can't gain any traction. And I look at images, and it's like a 1950s wife like cooking in the kitchen with this pan they're trying to sell, and I'm dying on the inside. I'm dying on the inside because I love to cook, don't get me wrong, but the 50s were the 50s, and those were the stereotypes back then, and we have come really far, and men don't want to be sold to anymore all the time. Like, they're the ones who are going to do all of this stuff, and women don't want to be sold to like they're not going to be able to do this stuff. So again, it goes back to capabilities. Know your market. You can tell usually a voice that's female or male looking through the forums, or even just by their names. Looking through the different forums and the Amazon reviews of your competitors. Go and look and see who's buying it, because that's who's reviewing it. Usually is the person who's buying it. And who's actually putting it together, or who's actually installing it, or who's Greener Chef is a whole this awesome brand that I work with, who it's both a dad and a mom kind of together doing this, and the dad's been the driving force behind it. Same thing with one of the weight loss supplements that I was working with recently, where the male is the driving force behind it, and it doesn't make somebody, people just don't want to be spoken to like they're like it's 1950 anymore.
Yeah, right. That's when being massively out of touch with your market. And by the way, I think there's so much to unpack here, but what strikes me is that the reality of the dynamics of play is much more complex than that, I guess, because most domestic-driven buying decisions, apparently 90% or something, are made by women, many of whom own drills, and some of whom are kind of like a 50s housewife, but they're mostly the ones making the decision. Now, I can really see a situation, very probable, in fact, that at some point, it's probably not theoretical, probably in the next week, my wife is going to buy something on Amazon to try and solve a problem here, or maybe some other site. but I will be presented with that as we, the royal we, which anyone who's been married for more than 5 minutes will recognize. We have decided to buy this, meaning I bought this and now I want you to install it.
Together.
So,
Yep.
the person buying it may not have the same resistance putting it up, even if the person installing it is a different person. So there's lots of dynamics. And the other thing is, okay, a lot of gifts for women under the word gifts for women. I've always wondered, but there are some weird, freaky keywords that you come up like gifts for women doesn't actually seem that competitive. And you think it's a very generic keyword, but then you think about who would write that. That's a very generic thing. Who would write that? Because most people want something. They want a specific gift. I'm like, okay, my instinct as a man who is maybe not always in touch with what what women want is okay. It's a desperate man shopping last minute because he wants to be seen to buy it.
Don't do that.
No. By the way, not. This is not advice for anyone. I don't give marital advice, and please don't. My lawyer would get upset if I did, but I don't. I'm not a marriage guidance counselor, nor do I play one on the internet for sure. But the point is that you've got to recognise the dynamic of who's buying. Just because the end consumer may be person A, if person B is buying, it's going to be completely different. Like a man shopping for a woman is going to buy very different stuff to a woman shopping for, say, jewelry or lingerie or whatever. They may or may not be misguided decisions, which is a different problem, right?
We really appreciate you even try. I'm just going to start there. So we really appreciate you even try. Okay, and that is marriage advice. And my lawyer will not get mad at me because I have that background in therapy. So I'm allowed to say it. We really appreciate that you really try. But maybe since we're talking about our customers, if your wife was your customer, you might look for something like gifts for women who like science, DIY, art, painting, plants. Like there's so many other things to look at. And a lot of those are still gender stereotype, like mechanics, gifts for mechanics, gift for scientists, gift for, you totally leave the woman out of it unless you have a really straight edge traditional demographic or psychographic. And there are those. If you're selling to people who are over 60, 65 years old, okay, they tend to, I just had this conversation the other day. It was amazing. We were looking at this, 80 pages of data from this company. And I love data. I worked for the National Science Foundation for a while. I love analytics. And so we were looking at this and we're like, okay, your customer base is split squarely in half. We have a huge chunk of people in the Midwest of the United States, and they're over 60. And they're mostly, it's like 76% women, right? And we're able to kind of boil down this data and look at, we're using software to boil down the data. We weren't doing this in our heads, although you can usually make some pretty strong correlations by the time you've done this for 11, 12 years. And we saw, but wait a minute, you have 50% of your customers we're in New York, we're in DC, we're in, the really busy city areas, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, right? And so we're looking at this product going, okay, we need to sell this to two completely different sets of people, right? We've got the city people who are using this, who are income 160,000 plus a year. They have 2 kids, they drive a Lexus or a Jaguar, or, they have their 3 car types. And then there's here's your other demographic. They're over 60. They're using this for a different reason. They drive Ford F-250s or Ford F-350s. They're 20 plus years. Their vehicles are 20 plus years old. They wear the same clothing. They shop at Walmart, but they're still going to spend $40 on your product. So you have to look sometimes splitting your product. And actually, that's a really good way to diversify your income. I don't know how we got from capabilities into this, but that's just another.
I don't know. Yeah. This is fantastic. This is a fantastic ride, I have to say. This is amazing. I mean, I was about to ask you some really dumb, simplistic questions, but to be honest, I'm not sure that we can boil it down that much. But I just think that's a very important point. And particularly, and I think you've made an important point there that is maybe a wider cultural point without getting into politics or getting off topic from Amazon selling or e-commerce. But America is a more, I don't know if divided is the right word to you or positive, but a very, very, very diverse society in the sense of the Midwest culture, very, very different from the coastal culture, which is shown up in politics. But also, if you're trying to sell physical products, I think it's so important to bear that in mind. If you're in the UK, which has also got a lot of diversity in a small space, but it's just physically quite small, there's a lot of different ethnicities here, which have very different buying characteristics, a significant percentage of the population. That said, I mean, it's more homogeneous, and I think European societies generally tend to be more homogeneous than America. So I think you have to make more clear avatar buying decisions, I think, in America in most of the time than you would necessarily in the UK, which is an incredibly important point that you've just raised. That it's true for Americans, most of them wouldn't think of that necessarily, but it's really true for Europeans, including I guess Europeans, Brits, are they Europeans? We don't even know. That's another identity crisis. If you're selling to Britain, that's something you have to deal with as Americans. But the point is, these are all
Yeah.
thought points that we've really got to look into. And as you say, the data. The trouble with Amazon is the data is lacking, right? We don't get that demographic data. Have you got any sort of thoughts on how we can figure out who our customer avatar is in the Amazon sort of
I
environment?
do in terms of like how to tweak your sales copy after you figure out where Amazon's going to have you ship your product. So Amazon's going to have you ship your product split between hubs that they think it's going to sell the fastest. So if you suddenly find that you're shipping your product to Seattle and Los Angeles and whatever hub they're shipping to outside of New York right now based on the COVID outbreak over there with Amazon, you then have an inkling that they probably don't see this product selling a lot to people in the Midwest. If you're shipping to Pennsylvania and you're shipping to Kentucky and you're shipping to Texas, that tells you, I don't know if they have a hub in Kentucky right now. Pennsylvania, Texas, and wherever else they've recently moved their hub.
Yeah.
That right there is a huge sign that Amazon thinks that your product is gonna, and they're not 100% right, but they hold the data and we don't before they sell the product. So that's something to look at. It's like, okay, are you selling to Ford F-350 or Chevy people, or are you going to be selling to the Lexus crowd?
I think it's incredibly important. Yeah. And it's such a crusted, what you're talking about, the data is not a subtle difference either, is it? That's like a really, really massive difference with the same products.
Right now it's a divisively hard line.
Yeah.
There's like a divisive hard line. And that will put, we've been here before, like, 30 years ago, 40, oh my God, I'm almost 40 years ago when we're going from Carter to Reagan. And now we're looking at this again, where we're in this really divisive time and there's a lot going on. But it's really important right now. You don't want to ship, 1,000 products, 1,000 pieces, 1,000 units, whatever you want to call them, into, 2 different hubs and then have your sales copy mirror that Amazon is going to be selling it, to a completely different demographic or psychographic.
That's very true. I mean, it's also, I've seen this myself thinking about, had a product that was in the music sort of space, and overwhelmingly I noticed, like, why does this stuff keep going to California and Pennsylvania but nowhere? My American geography isn't incredible, but I knew that there was no Chicago or Illinois, and it was all about the coasts, and I thought that's interesting. And I guess I realized afterwards, okay, so it's mostly people who are more likely to be college educated because it was something to do with classical music. So I thought, well, probably is that. And I'm not judging that's good or bad. I was trying to figure out who the heck is buying this, and it's mostly on the coast, mostly cities, and it's sort of, after a while, I made sense of it psychologically, but it was a very clear, unsubtle pattern. As you say, where is the stuff going? It was going to the corners, to the coasts of the country, not the middle, primarily.
The coast, because that is expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive to hub on the coast. If they were just focused on the cheapest hubbing possible, they'd have in the Midwest. I
guess it would be Wisconsin, right? Somewhere like that. It's just got like bigger than the UK and has 500,000 people in. Crazy. There's some really empty spaces in America.
Massive empty spaces, and yet here Amazon is. I live like Jeff Bezos lives like an hour and a half from me, or an hour from me.
Yeah.
Right? So down in Bellevue area, Washington, he actually lives in. I think he's in Medina now. He might be on the other side of Lake Washington, Seattle, but. The funny thing is, like, I know it feels weird. It's like, do you know him? But I don't think he would know me by name. You would think, but no. The funny thing is, like, you go down there and they are building tens of thousands of offices in Bellevue, Washington, right by where he's at. That is one of the most expensive places to live and to run a business in the U.S., if not on the planet. Not kidding. It compares to San Francisco and New York, and it's crazy how expensive it is to live there and how expensive it is to build a business there. I've lived there. I grew up around that area. And yet he's doing that. He's not looking for the least expensive thing. He's looking for the smartest way to serve the customers. And he knows that the best talent he's going to find right now is still in this specific area. A lot of that is because of the education and because of other small businesses. This is like the best place in the world to start a small business, apparently. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting how I always try to think of his thought process too when we're going through this. Like, why are they doing this? Why are we shipping to Pennsylvania? What do they know that we don't? Because we don't have access to all of that.
Yeah. One thing you can say about Jeff Bezos for sure is that anything that happens that he's had a hand in is super, super, super thought through. Like at a level that even the great Steve Jobs or the business heroes, he's got that mathematical kind of meticulous strategic thinking mind that I think is like his ninja skill. I mean, he's obviously super smart in lots of technical ways, but it just seems to me like he's a chess player. He looks famously he plans 7 years ahead and everyone looks 3. I mean, that's one reason he's won, right? I mean, so far.
Yep.
I mean, but
he's just in pharmaceuticals. Like he started shifting the pharmaceutical side of things.
Yeah.
And that's where the bulk of their advertising is going right now, is towards pharmaceuticals, which is really interesting. And they're doing it free with this free, what is it, free medicine packs, I think is what it is. So you pay the same for your prescription, but Amazon now ships them to you in Monday at 8 a.m., Monday at 3 p.m. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, and they're charging nothing extra for it, but that's his way of breaking into the pharmaceutical industry because he sees that's where that's going. You know, same with green energy. He's doing the same thing where in Washington now, all of our boxes, like they send us these cute little things and these cute little videos that show us how to turn our boxes into something different. We now we can turn them into pet homes. I've got a bunch of stuffy shelters running around my house right now because we buy a ton from Amazon. I mean, he really does think way, way, way ahead. It's going way beyond, oh, well, we're just going to recycle this too. How can we get double use out of it, you know? And I don't know, are they doing that in the UK yet, where they're taking boxes and they're telling you how to use them differently?
Haven't come across it, but it doesn't mean that it isn't. I mean, normally what happens is they trial this stuff in America, in the kind of heartland, where they've got, you know, still a bigger consumer base than anywhere else. And I suppose they probably start in Seattle and then roll it out, you know, nationwide, and then take it to Europe normally within, you know, 3 to 6 months. Haven't come across it, but it doesn't mean it's not about to happen.
Yeah.
Wow, so we've gotten to some quite big picture topics, but nevertheless, I think it's all part of what I really love about this conversation. It's not just being the mechanics of it. And to be quite honest, I was thinking, oh, another person talking about Amazon copywriting. It's incredibly important, but nevertheless, it'd be the same old, same old. And I was totally and utterly wrong. You've really been very, very interesting and thought provoking.
Compliment, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great because I think you haven't just given us a load of tactical things. And tactical lists and checklists are very, very valuable, and people have given those in the past, and those are really good, and they're very good to hang on to for the newer sellers. But for those who've been around for a while, I think really if you just keep churning out the same old, you're going to get the same old results. And this level of thinking you've given us with your sort of 5 logical levels is a really great framework. I'm just going to reiterate those because I think they're really good. I think we missed environment actually. So the first one is belief in a firepower.
Yeah, environment's the last one. I didn't even get there.
So let me just reiterate them, and then we'll get environment from you, and then we ought to wrap up. But belief in a higher power. So in other words, is it a fate or you? I love that. So determinism. I love the fact that determinism comes into buying stuff on Amazon. For some reason, that floats my boat.
That just cracks me up every single time. I'm like, okay, great.
Amazing. The second one is identity, and you know that's so, you know, how you're perceived, what your vehicle that you drive says about you, which obviously means a lot to you, and I'm the same.
How your kids dress, like everything is about, you know. And there's the opposite of that, which I was going to mention, which is, and I'll just mention it real quick, I promise. The people who are like who are like, we call them type Z's. And they're like, oh, because everybody else wants me to do this, I'm going to do the exact opposite.
Oh, yeah.
We call those people opposite oriented, just, you know, opposite oriented. They're the person who's going to purposely do the opposite just so that they're proving that they're not going to make you happy. Okay,
is that like the mismatch sort of idea? Is that the same sort of idea, mismatching? I'm a bit like that, actually. I think sometimes my wife's like, said the other day, like, why are you criticizing everything I ever say? I'm like, no, I'm just trying to improve it. You know?
That's a little bit different. This is the person who will blatantly like drive on the wrong side of the road just because I'm like telling them, like, as they're pulling out away from being pulled over for speeding in front of a cop, they will then drive across the wrong side of the road, just as kind of a, I don't care what you think, and I'm specifically going to show you I care that little. With you, it might just more be like poking buttons and figuring out, like, well, what is it that, you know?
Yeah, maybe more. I'm not quite that kind of, you know, sort of giving the finger to the police as I drive off kind of thing.
I didn't want to say give the finger, but
that's really not my thing. Yeah, but I'm not quite sure how that ties in with the Amazon selling. So coming back to the list, so we got the beliefs, capabilities, and then the last one you're talking about environment. So interesting that originally in psychology or sociology, that was seen as your determining component. So you come from a nice, you know, family that you grew up in the Hamptons, you went to a private school, you went to Harvard or whatever, therefore you're going to be rich. And that is no longer the determining factor in NLP. But obviously that's the last piece that we didn't mention. So tell me a bit about the environment and how that sort of affects people's buying decisions.
Environment tends to affect, and this is again not a judgment, environment tends to affect people's decisions most when they have a high school degree or less. So so if we're looking at selling a product to someone who, and this also, and if you have a trade degree, that's not a high school degree or less. That's still someone who's gone through and gained specialized knowledge to perform a skill for a higher set of pay. But when we're looking at writing to people who have, you know, maybe your demographic does specialize in, I think it's still 46% of, I want to say 46% of the US still only has a high school degree or less, which is great. But maybe, someone, when you're selling something like a specific kind of coat that you're going to wear in a specific kind of job, like an unskilled manufacturing job, or landscaping job or something along those lines. Not the boss, you're talking to the person who's actually mowing the lawn, right? Which is, just as, if not more important than the boss. There is a certain thing about environment, like the way they grew up. They tend to be more anchored to what their parents' beliefs were, rather than exploratory outside of their own beliefs as adults. They tend to be anchored. So then it kind of, that environmental piece really starts flipping things, right? So their identity is based on their parents. Their higher power belief is based on their parents and everybody who's come before them. They're more afraid of being rejected from the tribe, right? So we talk a lot more about, Ruby Payne did a really good job with this. So she would talk about shifting of classes, right? So the specific language you use really makes a difference in this. So like, for example, let's say that you are someone who did go to Harvard, or maybe you went to, one of maybe you went to Cambridge, right? And you would walk into a French restaurant and you would know how to behave, and you'd know which silverware to use for which dish, and you would know where your glass goes, your water goblet. You would know how to speak French and order in French, and you would understand very plainly that it's not just about the taste of the food or the volume of the food, the quantity of the food. You'd understand that it is actually the presentation, right? So let's take that to a level of someone who grew up in like a, like a Midwestern or Southern environment where both their parents were high school educated. They both worked in unskilled factory type positions or retail positions, and they still have money. They still need to buy things. They still need to solve problems. And a lot of Amazon sellers make a lot of money solving these individuals' problems month after month after month, right? So let's say, like instead of the middle class, being in the middle class side of things where you're looking more, the question that you would ask is, how does it taste? You go to a chain restaurant, people want to know how it tastes. They're not generally talking about the presentation. You're not ordering in a foreign language. It's something that, as long as you have a 7th grade education or higher, you can read the menu, you can order, you can probably even pair some wine with it. Just some basics. And know that red meat goes with red wine and turkey goes with white wine, Chardonnay, whatever, right? We're talking about the class that's just kind of a little bit beyond that, where they're looking at things like quantity. You're talking about your value, right? Your value buyers. So someone who still wants a really good product because they want to be able to like beat their chest in front of their family and say, okay, well, I grew up in this environment where we make really good decisions with our money and we save money, and I really feel like I got this incredible value on this, and I still got the best product possible, but I got it for better, for less money than what I would have paid if I would have gone down to the feed store, or where even like Safeway. I don't know if they have. I don't think they have these over here. Like the grocery store or the pharmacy. I did a really good job getting a really good deal. We call those our deal hunters. And some people, and environment plays a huge role in how individuals spend money. Now, the funny thing is, this doesn't just go back to the environment doesn't just go back to like whether or not you had a lot of money growing up. It goes back to the perception of how your parents believe, how much money your parents believed they had, and how much they believed really that money was always going to be there for them. And this goes down to mindset, right? So environment is more about mindset now than it is about necessarily how you were, how much money you had growing up, right? Because I know people who make 7 figures a year and who still like are penny pinching like crazy because their parents were making 6 figures a year when they were in elementary school, but their parents were always like, we're gonna die if we don't save 30% of our income, and like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's, environment has a lot more to do with that on the NLP side than necessarily like where they used to look at did you have the opportunities? Were your parents poor education? Were they, so yeah, it's more of the, what meta programs are we really running when we're making decisions about how much we'll spend on an item.
This is amazing. I mean, there's so much that goes into this. But I'm just thinking about myself. You talked about the person who went to Cambridge, walks into a French restaurant, knows how to behave, had it all in French. I'm like, okay, that's my dad. He was a solicitor, so a lawyer, nothing
Right?
particularly high powered, but like for him, that would be a really important thing. Like the appearing is a very English thing as well of his generation anyway. Appearing to be sophisticated is an incredibly important value to him. Whereas I also know people, I'm a little bit more on the side of like, I've just paid £10 and I've just, 12, $13 and I've just eaten a lot of really tasty food and it was a good bulk and I feel I got value. So I'm kind of halfway between, which is interesting. But what you say is just rings so true if I reflect on my own experience and then people that I know. And the point about this stuff that I love is to bring it home, really, that this is not an abstract thing. It's got an intellectual framework, which I personally find fascinating. Some people might just say, give me the money, maybe because they grew up with people who've said that they didn't have enough money, and but the point is, this shows up in real life is what I can really see how directly, and especially a more sophisticated seller who's been selling for a while, should be going back through their copy and really thinking, who am I selling to, what are their values, and this stuff is really clear to me. I think this is a super great framework. I've been speaking to Americans for too long. Awesome framework, I should say. Really great framework. I like it a lot. Final point I wanted to just touch on, and then we ought to wrap up because it's getting quite a long episode, but I don't want to stop a great conversation, and that is the ethical side, because I know that for you that's really important. And tell me how you feel about this side of things.
I kind of cringe a little bit with this. The ethical side is the most important side to me. Like I said, coming from the space of a mom and a former teacher, I still do a lot of teaching and trainings, and a therapist, someone who works in the therapy side of things. I really want, if I could get one message out there to newer sellers who are being told that it's all about the money, it's really important. I'm fierce about a lot of things, but I'm really fierce about this. When you're going to buy something, you have to make sure you're not going to do harm to anybody, right? Not in the body, not on the body, not whether it's weed whacker string or a supplement or a piece of clothing. Make sure you order whatever it is and test it out first. Every little thing matters. Like in Amazon, it really hit me hard. I think it was a couple weeks ago, there was an 18-year-old kid who got this caffeine supplement off Amazon and just took too much of it. And Amazon said, we're not liable. And the third party seller said, we're not liable. And I completely understand where they came from, but it turns out that the dose in that particular product was way too high for human consumption anyway, right? People should not have been consuming that. And as a mom, that really gets to me. So I think that's one of the biggest things is if you can, being able to mention that in your sales copy for someone like me, to be like, okay, I know that they're going through all these third-party checks. I know that they are, if they're selling a supplement, they're creating an FDA certified facility, or in the UK, obviously we have different terms than FDA certified. That it's CGMP, which is Certified Journal, Good Manufacturing Processes, that, if you can say anything about, we're making sure that people who are making the product are being taken care of, we're making sure that this product is not going to do harm to anybody else. That's a huge selling point for someone like me who's really picky about who I take on when it goes in or on the body, or even will send money back if there's a product that it's like, I won't sell this. I'm not going to help you make money off of this, 100,000 or a million or whatever you want to make. And neither will anybody else who's at the same level that I'm at in terms of turning out results. If you are going to sell something that is not ethical, if you're going to sell something that's going to harm somebody, if your whole point is profit, those of us who've made it this far have not made it this far because we were doing it for the money and because we're really smart. We've done it because we put our foot down when things are not right. So that's something to really consider for newer sellers and even sellers who are continuing to sell. Start looking at, not only what your customers care about, but, are you going to be able to continue at the same level of sustainable profit if people find out that you're doing this in a way that is not ethical? So that was, to end on a really sad, serious note, that's really important to me. It's important to a lot of consumers and a lot of providers out there right now.
No, I think it is an important thing to say because we've been talking about how to sell stuff and marketing, and I think a lot of people's perception of marketers has been quite understandably darkened a lot by being manipulated. And it would be tempting to summarize what we've just said as, there's 5 excellent ways to manipulate people into buying things for our own profits.
You're supposed to be solving a problem, not manipulating people. This just helps them drop their subconscious guard so you can solve their problem. This should never be misused for, and we see it, our government, we see it in the words that our government has been saying for the past, I don't even want to get into it, but it's, should not, they're using NLP and conversational hypnosis. They're using the specific phrases that we use, and it's not okay. So
Yeah, I guess with knowledge comes power, and NLP sounds like you've got some
Yeah.
very powerful frameworks. And I guess that I would just say, I mean, I've reflected on ethics a lot with my podcast co-host Jason Miles in a sort of sister podcast, the e-commerce leader, which is it's broader than Amazon. But one of the things we came to as a conclusion was pretty simple, which is that ethical behavior is actually good for business in the medium and long term because it helps your reputation and therefore people will trust you and keep buying your stuff. It's quite straightforward, but it doesn't start with that as an end. I mean, I know that, for example, that I used to sort of attend Quaker meetings. I'm not a man of any religious sort of belief, but and the Quakers in the UK couldn't become doctors or lawyers because they wouldn't swear in the Bible. So a lot of them became business people, and they were really successful apparently. And one of the reasons was because people believed what they said, because it was one of their articles of their religious beliefs that my word is my bond. They refused to swear on the Bible or God or anything. And actually that was just good for business because people believed them when they said stuff. So they built trust, and therefore people would enter into contracts with them. So trust is good for business.
These brands end up being, like these brands that just started, like Genius. They started, like 8 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and they're now competing with some of the biggest names, and they're not one of my clients. They have a whole in-house sales copy team and business strategy team, clearly it's working. But and they've been able to just go out and, scale high because people trust them. Sports Research Institute, people trust them, I'm trying specifically not to mention my clients on here because I don't want it to seem like a promo for my clients.
Sure.
Sorry guys, I just, I don't want to do that. So yeah, I think that, doing well, I've always lived in my business in my life pretty much, doing well by doing good, right? Like I said, teacher, therapist, moving over to business expert, sales copywriter, made people $5 billion. I even guarantee my work. I have a 10x guarantee, and I have a 97% success rate getting there, right? That means that while everybody else is doing 50% success rates in the sales copy and business consulting world, I'm hitting 97%, and I'm guaranteeing that. I think that that's the right thing to do ethically. The other thing is a rising tide that lifts all boats. I have a training out there that's free. I know that all of the other top Amazon, people out there, all of the top people who are out there really trying to help you, it's a free, they have free trainings. The reason for that is because we believe a rising tide lifts all boats. It's not about one person getting ahead of everybody else and making all the money. It's about helping everybody make the most that they possibly can without hurting anybody else while serving the customer the best they possibly can and solving their problem. So if you can come from that mindset, I really think that especially newer people are going to go a lot farther in business than just looking at calculated profits and analytics and statistics. And, think about a human heart. What are you doing to that person? How are you helping that person? How are you solving their problem? How are you transforming their life? That's why I got into this, is because you can transform lives really quickly doing this. So anyhow, I'm rambling.
No, this is great. I love it. I think it's incredibly positive. Right? That's a real tweetable there, isn't it? Doing well by doing good is incredibly tweetable. Yeah. And how are you transforming their life? I think really it's such a positive question. Like if you're just selling somebody a nail file, maybe you're not transforming everything. But if for example, their visual identity is important to them, having beautifully done nails when they go into their fresh restaurant, it's all part of the thing. So yeah, it's part of their identity. I love it. This has been really revelatory stuff. Thank you very much, Diane, for your amazing thoughts. And if people want to contact you, and you mentioned your YouTube training and stuff, how do people find out more from you?
First of all, I'm open to any questions about anything we've said here, or anything, anything that this sparked. I always love having conversations and helping people. So questions are welcome. The best way to contact me is Diane at AmazonSalesGuru.com. I didn't make that name up. That was a client joke. It just stuck. I don't think I'm a guru. The other one is if you go to Amazon and you type in Hypnotic Amazon Copywriter, you can find all the trainings for free, and there's templates underneath that. Like you can download the templates for the title, the 8 different kinds of titles based on how you want to grow your brand, the different keyword bullet points, how to find the best keywords, even how to source really great products. The 126-point checklist that I use is on there. The psychology behind all sales copy is on there. It's actually, there's 12 hours of training, but you can pick the videos you really want to watch. And then, join that group. And there's a whole collaboration on Facebook of us who talk about this stuff almost every day. So you're welcome to join the Facebook group too, which I think you get a link to after you download the free trainings, I believe.
So if you go to Amazon and type in Hypnotic Amazon Copywriter, is that right? That's where we find it.
YouTube.
Okay, YouTube.
YouTube.
Okay,
Go
not
to
Amazon.
YouTube.
Yeah.
If you go
Yeah.
to Amazon and type in Hypnotic Amazon copywriter, I don't know what's going to pop
No.
up.
Good stuff. Well,
Tell
look,
me when you do it.
yeah,
I don't
it'd
give
be
up.
interesting. See if somebody's out there writing a book for you. Well, look, Diane, it's been absolutely great stuff. I really love the high level thinking that goes into really diving so deep into the customer's mindset and really thinking about, in the end, how to serve them, which is such a positive way of thinking as well. So thank you so, so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast. It's really me, talk for so long. I really hope it's helped people.